Nine o'clock here on a Monday night on this President's Day. Welcome in as we look back at the prosecution's case in the Alex Murdaugh double murder trial. Look ahead to what the defense will have to do this week. Being joined by our experts tonight, Luke and Brian Sheely. Guys, thank you so very much for your time.
Thank you.
All right, so we are 4 weeks finished with this trial. I believe there was some discussion early on that this might be 2 or 3 weeks. We've gone well past that time. Why does it take us so long?
In our experience, everything takes longer, at least when we try cases, than shorter. But you always have more objections, more hiccups, more bomb threats.
Well, we did that.
So in a case like this, sometimes both sides underestimate. But at this point, if the state had any kind of estimate, certainly they're the ones that have gone over, but they haven't really belabored at any point. It's just been a lot of technical data. Then you had the late arriving OnStar stuff that added more time to it.
Right.
So it's just the way it works. As long as the jury is staying focused, that's the problem that you run into. If you drag on, if they think something's obvious or that someone's beating a dead horse, that's your problem.
We're going to get into what the defense is going to be doing this week, what you guys think they should be doing, but let's look back at some of the bigger things that have happened here in this trial. When I think of some of the big things that have happened, I go back to the dog kennel video that apparently surprised Alex Murdaugh. That video where several people testified they heard Alex Murdaugh's voice on that videotape at the dog kennels. I think that's damaging, but that's just my own opinion. That's a damaging piece of evidence in this trial so far. Would you guys agree?
Yeah, absolutely. Alex Murdaugh is going to have to either explain why he would forget that small detail and also leave his phone at the house and not bring it with him to the kennels, as his GPS data kind of has it at the Moselle house, the big house, or they're going to have to flip it and say that's not his voice. Let me bring in 4, 5, 6 other witnesses, maybe Buster, maybe Alex's brother, maybe some other people. It's a possibility to try to say that's not his voice. Luke and I were talking about that today. The way they examined the witnesses that were clearly identifying from their own past experience Alex Murdaugh on that video, the examination from the defense of them was a little soft touch. They weren't trying to hammer them. They weren't trying to make them change their mind. And it's either because they're going to embrace that, or they're just going to bring in a bunch of witnesses to say, no, I disagree.
Right, and for people who have been following this trial, that dog kennel video shows a dog named Cash wagging its tail repeatedly, and you hear voices in the background, and witness after witness testifying as Alex Murdaugh on that tape when he says he was napping inside the home at that time and that he couldn't have possibly have been there. Another big thing that stands out to me is that Snapchat video that they entered into evidence as well, showing him wearing different clothing from the night when authorities questioned him. And I'm sure, I guess the defense will have some sort of explanation for that.
Right. I mean, everybody loves kind of that gotcha moment, like, caught you lying, here we are. Since we don't literally have a smoking gun, those things could be smoking guns for the state, because with the different clothes in that video where he and Paul are observing the tree that's not standing up, the natural inference might be, well, why did you change clothes? Is it because they were bloody? Is it because you're hiding evidence? And of course the defense might counter, well, it's not too hard to describe changing clothes after a long day and running around the farm. You might want to change clothes for some other reason. But that is something that the state can tie into, because again, they don't have the smoking gun, but they have these massive inconsistencies with what Alex has said regarding being at the kennels or what he might have been wearing or doing, and that's part of how they're going to prove their case.
Right, and of course, Friday was some evidence that was entered last minute from General Motors, showing basically minute by minute Alex Murdaugh's location that night, at least his vehicle's location that night, from leaving his property to going to his parents' home, back to the property. It shows him slowing down near where Maggie Murdaugh's phone was found, speeding up once he gets past that point, flying down that highway at 80 plus miles an hour to get back to his property, arriving at the property about 10 o'clock, and within 20 seconds of getting to the dog kennels, he's calling 911. Is that too short of a period of time, 20 seconds, to reasonably think somebody can come upon a crime scene, your wife, your child, dead, blood's everywhere, and within 20 seconds, you're calling 911?
I don't think so. I'll just put it like this, JR. The state can plausibly say there's no way. This is a premeditated 911 call. This is all part of his alibi display. He knew what he was doing. He didn't check by the kennels, as it was testified would be his practice, driving back into the property. He went to the house, played the fool, and then went down there and too quickly called 911. At the same time, I remember Philip Barber doing a good job for the defense, saying, well, listen, it was dark. His headlights for his Suburban would have cast their light upon the bodies of his loved ones, and he just knew right away they were down, and he was calling 911. So I think it plays both ways. And to your point, the timeline put up by the lead or the technical case agent, kind of bringing in all the data, the GM data, the GPS coordinate data on Paul's phone as well as Alex Murdaugh's phone, that was a masterstroke by the state. And if I'm the state, I'm bringing you that evidence to help support my circumstantial evidence case, bringing it home to the jury so that they can cling to every detail and really focus on the details. The devil's in the detail. I've said that a lot in my closings. I imagine whoever's closing for the state, and whether it's Mr. Metters or Mr. Waters, will be using that kind of terminology. And I know Luke's got some thoughts on the importance of that timeline as well.
Well, I've got it right here. And it is fascinating. This is exactly, it's 43 pages. This is what the jury really needs to have in their laps to kind of go, okay, this tracks. It's an impressive amount of work by the state, but it still lends itself to some very obvious questions that the state hasn't really answered yet. I find it pretty interesting that it's pretty clear to me that Miss Murdaugh and Paul got down to the kennels by different modes. You can see pretty clearly that it looks like she would be taking 43 steps approximately, maybe catching a ride on some type of ATV or a side-by-side, whereas they're overlapping slightly and he's walking 283 steps to get down there. He's on a phone with his friend, Mr. Rogan, for about 4 minutes, possibly concerning the dog. Then there's the Snapchat video of the dog, Cash. And then, things start to get a little quiet when we assume the murders are happening. So she got down there differently, and the state's theory is that Alec is down there, and his phone is registering those steps, and we can assume that he rode down there with her on the same cart or ATV or side-by-side, trying to leave his phone up, I guess purposely, to not show his location. Didn't expect to be caught in the video. And then you've got the killings occurring based on when their phones go silent, they're not responding. But then at 8:53 to 8:55, her phone is registering 59 steps. Now, you could play it a couple different ways. In a simple version, maybe if Mr. Murdaugh, Alec, is the one that's doing this, he grabs her phone, but for some reason doesn't grab his son's phone. Mm-hmm. So you've got kind of a weird mixed up mindset there. Why grab one but not the other? But then you're driving back with the same side-by-side to the main house. But at that time period from basically you've got those same times, 8:53 through 8:55, when her phone is registering some steps in that process, and we know it leaves the scene. You've got this time period through 9:02 where his phone is registering no steps. So that if I'm the defense, I'd latch onto that. How can he be the killer, take her phone, where there's a period of time where if he's in possession of it to get rid of it, why isn't it registering steps if his is? And, the state tried to gloss over that. If I'm the defense, I'm holding on to that for dear life. The other question it lends itself to is perhaps a second assailant.
Right.
Who possibly, whether it's Cousin Eddie, whether it's whatever, could have been hightailing it out with her phone while he's able to, if you're the state, make your alibi, get rid of things, clean your clothes, text your wife, your dead wife, that you love her and you're going to go check on your mom, and then head up the road. Now that's if you're the state, but they never really tried to answer that glaring gap of what would seem to be a second person. So I don't know how they do that.
Well, there's been a lot of discussion by outsiders looking into this trial. It's like, okay, he doesn't have the blood all over him. He doesn't have really the gunshot residue everywhere. Sure, it was inside that jacket, but where is the hard physical evidence? And that has led to some people to say, oh, well, maybe there was an accomplice in this case. Is that something that you guys believe the defense will try to point to say, not that he had an accomplice, but that this was someone else altogether that did this?
100%. 100%. They're going to say someone else did this. They're going to reference kind of the general consensus that there would be a lot of blood, especially from the killing of Paul, from the crime scene, that would have been all over the perpetrator. They're going to reference the kind of ridiculous nature of the state's theory of motive. They're going to be about, if I'm stealing money from my law firm and doing whatever I'm doing with it, why am I going to kill my family to then have a international microscope on me? One thing, JR, that I thought was pretty interesting, and upon reflection, thinking about what was Dick Harpootlian trying to do, he had a little bit of a meandering style with the pathologist, and I think I said last week when I was here talking about it that you can't really do a hard cross on the smartest person in the room. He had to kind of have a conversational approach, but it was clear that what Dick Harpootlian was doing was that he was trying to make it a close shot. He was trying to make the critical fatal wound to Paul one that would have been such close proximity that it would have had massive amounts of blood on the perpetrator and the weapon. Mm-hmm. So when we're dealing with a clean Suburban, like an absolutely clean Suburban, minus a little bit of gunshot residue on the steering wheel that, you live on hunting property, that was something big. Regarding Paul and the crime scene expert the state had on, he was brilliant. The gentleman from Orangeburg, I think it was Kinsley, that second shot, and I don't know if this was discussed before, but the second shot is from an extremely low angle. So you got an incredibly, disproportionately short person compared to Alex Murdaugh, who is well over 6 feet. But one thing that keeps coming to my mind is that, people that typically get low and fire a weapon when they're dealing with another human being, these are people that are typically trained in combat.
Right.
You close your space. A lot of military personnel have that kind of training. And if I'm the defense, I'm saying, listen, Alex Murdaugh doesn't have that kind of training, and he's a tall man. What is happening here?
But if it's somebody who's trying to make this look like it's a suicide, wouldn't they hold the gun lower down and shoot up, making it appear that somebody perhaps shot themselves?
Yeah, I think a lot of people got kind of caught a little bit sideways with that legal treatise that Dick Harpootlian introduced that had some reference to suicide and how that can bring about those kind of close contact wounds. And I think that's something that's kind of maybe been exaggerated. The defense is never going to come up here and credibly say that Paul Murdaugh tried to kill himself.
Plus, you can't commit suicide and then get rid of all the weapons.
Right. that is a red herring in terms of a legal phrase that kind of got, the defense is not going to get up here and try to say that at all. I just think that was referenced in the treatise. I think what their point was that it was such a close wound, there would be massive amounts of blood on the perpetrator and the weapon. But it is quite interesting. So the low shot, JR, I don't think that has anything to do with any kind of alleged suicide on Paul. I saw a lot of kind of outrage about that concept and how disrespectful that would be. I don't think that's what they were trying to do. I just think part of that page has a reference to suicide with shotgun, and that's one way to have a close blast like that.
Right. The state was able to get in the roadside shooting incident without calling Cousin Eddie to the stand. They played tapes of the 911 call. They also played a videotape of him inside the ambulance repeating the same story. So again, Cousin Eddie's not called to the stand. You guys thought at one point he might, but then you were like, well, they're not going to call him. And at the end of the day, the state did not call, but yet this evidence gets in. How big of a deal is this for the jury?
Huge. I think the state got to have their cake and eat it too. Obviously, Cousin Eddie has his own baggage that they were worried about. But due to the judge's ruling, whether we agree or disagree, it was opening the door or not, they got into that evidence, and they get to show that he's a liar and that he's willing to go to great lengths to commit essentially a fraud upon people. Now, that was a financial fraud with the attempted suicide for life insurance money, but you get him saying one thing with a straight face and then having to admit, when forced with the evidence, that he's a liar later. So that is an absolute gem of a thing to have if you're the prosecution. Because in this case, Brad and I don't see any way that Alex Murdaugh gets off unless he can convincingly show that someone else did it, this Ozark theory, this other criminal element. Mm-hmm. And that's not objective evidence in the record. It has to come from him.
Right.
So he has to testify, and when he does, the simple cross-examination of him is, well, you said something credible before, and then you admitted to be lying. So here, you expect us to believe you? No, sir. And so that's really what the state now can do for him if and when he has to take the stand. And I still think he has to, because there's not independent evidence of some other criminal element. We've got these bizarre money transfers to Cousin Eddie with so much money, and Jim Griffin tried to insinuate through the investigator for opioid, and the investigator didn't really disagree with him, but they're not really pouring evidence of that theory into the case yet. It has to come from Alex Murdaugh, and he's got his own lies to be confronted with when that time comes.
If I remember correctly, a small amount, a small amount of blood found on the steering wheel of Murdaugh's vehicle, Maggies DNA, I believe. Mm-hmm. How does the defense overcome that this week? If they can overcome that.
I don't think that's a huge obstacle. I think they've got way bigger obstacles, because they talk about him driving down there, discovering the bodies, doing some checking, driving back up, haphazardly getting a shotgun that's loaded with the wrong ammo. So I think they're okay with that. They're okay with GSR in his car. What they have to be able to do is explain the video at the kennels with 4, 5, 6 people identifying his voice.
Right.
They have to be able to explain, the alibi calls, the roadside shooting, his mental state, and really distinguish between a man who might be desperate and sad versus one who's a cold-hearted, malicious killer. And that's the thing. I see evidence of two different things in this case, because you can't really be an evil genius mastermind who can commit this type of murder, get rid of all the evidence in a matter of about 15, 16 minutes, never have any blood on you, no guns found, nothing except for circumstantial evidence, and being caught in some lies. That's pretty genius, but at the same time, you've got this huge amount of financial crimes there's this massive paper trail. You're not exactly covering your tracks. You got checks and notebooks in your office. You're emailing for $600,000 additional loans. You've got all these outlined, payouts to Cousin Eddie. So you're not exactly a mastermind. Yet somehow we're missing this critical evidence for the state, and just to put it right there, if you're Alex Murdaugh and you've just done this terrible crime, why take your wife's phone but not your son's phone? Somebody's in two different minds there, or two different people. That makes no sense to me. So I'm very curious to see what the defense does with it. If the state can help fill in the gaps, it's fascinating.
Brian, your take on the defense this week. They put out a couple of witnesses Friday, one of them being the coroner, who basically said, the time of death could be 8:30. Oh, it could be 9 o'clock. He really didn't have an exact time of death here. So, and another witness, I believe, talking about the press release that came out. But the crux of their case, I guess, will begin tomorrow. How hard of a job will the defense have here in the days ahead with this jury?
It's going to be tough in light of the roadside video kind of situation that then morphed into the rehab confession. Mm-hmm. We touched upon it, and I don't want to belabor it, but hearing someone admit to lying in the presence of their own counsel to SLED agents, and you're looking around the courtroom and saying, wait, he lied in front of everybody here, and those are his lawyers that he was lying in front of, and he put himself in a position of the jury hearing it from his own words. But so that's the obstacle that the defense has to really start off with. I think we're going to see out of the gates one of 3 technical experts. I think the defense is going to have their own pathologist to talk about close range proximity, any kind of theory they want to extrapolate from that. I think we're going to have a crime scene expert. And I think we're going to probably have a firearms expert. And then I think we're going to be dealing with a lot of other witnesses, maybe to address the kennel voice,
Right.
people with knowledge, people that can, account for Alex character flaws
Right.
and kind of build him up again. That's going to be a big job of the defense because in this 4th week of the trial, he's a liar.
Right.
And I think we'll be dealing with that.
And a thief.
And then we're going to be dealing with what's their big position of defense. Is it going to be, he has an idea of who it was? Is it going to be, I know who it is? I mean, the defense has their own investigators. This may sound odd, but the rules of evidence in terms of the defense is they don't have to necessarily put up, like witness statements and various things until they're getting ready to put their witness on the stand. It's a little bit different from the state until they put it up in their case in chief. So there could be some surprises.
I think a surprise Friday also without the jury present. And this goes back to that dog kennel video. We've showed it to you a few times during our discussion tonight. But during this dog kennel video, these witnesses testified to hearing Alex Murdaugh's voice. In a mission in court on Friday by defense attorneys without the jury present, they tell the judge, well, the state has proven that Murdaugh was at the dog kennels that night. So the defense is going to say, yeah, he was there. At least they've said it to the judge. Will they say that to the jury now?
Yeah, one thing you don't want to do with Judge Newman is speak out of two sides of your mouth. So if they're in a position where they have embraced that bad fact, because you got to embrace your bad facts as a defense lawyer, live with them, and then try to own them or explain them. So I think, and that might be why they never really cross-examined very hard those loved ones that were identifying Alex's voice, is because they're prepared to embrace it. It might be that he's going to be like, look, mea culpa, I was scared. I knew from being a former prosecutor that, I was probably a suspect, so I didn't feel like I needed to be down there, and so I wrongly, told a little white lie. It could be something like that, rather than like bring in 10 witnesses to say that's not his voice, because that doesn't necessarily play very well in front of a jury. So it could be something very much like that they're prepared to live with that evidence.
Have we had one of those Perry Mason, Matlock aha moments in this trial yet? With the Friday testimony, the minute by minute of his movement, would that be one of those moments?
I think the aha moment was him admitting to lying about really an attempted murder case on himself. I mean, we've been kind of echoing this as long as we've been talking to you, JR, but the importance of not allowing yourself to be interrogated by law enforcement. I think last time I addressed this with you, I was aware of his 3rd statement, and then this week, the lie from rehab, the admission to a lie with lawyers present, that's really his 4th statement. And I bet this week we'll have his 5th statement, which will be sworn before the jury. So I think the aha moment is him admitting to being a liar, and kind of in a way that, he just kind of explains about why he had to lie and what he was thinking at the time, his mental state. To me, that was even more of an aha moment than the data, the timeline data, which it's interesting, and the state will be resting on it, and it'll give something for the jury to really sink their teeth into. But the aha moment was him admitting to being a liar concerning his suicide.
What's your take on that, Luke? You think that's pretty much it as well, or is there another moment?
Well, from the defense perspective, which I'm a defense lawyer, to me, a subtle little aha moment is the thing I brought up here that Philip Barber brought up, even with, I think it was Agent Britt Dove, which was, if he's got Maggie's phone, why isn't it registering steps when his phone is? That, to me, I remember watching it and was like, whoa, that's crazy. Why? What is that? So, and the state hasn't fully explained that. I think the timeline is more of a crushing avalanche moment where you're just running away from it and it's gaining on you, gaining on you, gaining on you. For the state, it's like everything they've done in a nice puzzle of overwhelming circumstantial evidence that really paints a clear picture. But it wasn't like finding the gun, or it wasn't like, some taped confession of his to this crime. But to me, from the defense side, the aha moment is still the difference between those two phones, if he is a killer and would have her phone.
You guys expect the defense to wrap everything up this week, or is it going to go into another week?
Well, we're on a short week, and if we're anticipating at least 3 experts with the pathologist, firearms, and crime scene, those cross-examinations can be lengthy. It could wrap up this week. Of course, if Alex Murdaugh takes a stand, and if I were his defense lawyer, I'd be thinking that's his only way out of this particular indictment on the double murders. That's going to be a massively long direct and cross-examination if it's done right.
That could be a whole day just for him.
That could be a day. So I would anticipate Monday we might be wrapping up. JR, I think the defense is going to have to put up some kind of third-party guilt analysis.
What do you mean by that?
Well, and
somebody else did it.
Somebody else did it. So there's a line of case law and a legal kind of doctrine on third-party guilt that basically the defense has to, if they're going to try to present credible evidence that someone else did this other than the defendant, if the defendant is not testifying, then they have to do it. It's kind of a difference between a scattershot approach with a shotgun. The law says you can't just kind of throw pellets at a wall. You have to kind of give more of a rifle direct evidence of someone else doing the crime. Luke and I put up a third-party guilt defense with Judge Newman about a decade ago, and so we had that kind of scenario. But if Alex Murdaugh testifies himself, he's got a right to his full and complete defense, and he can give a lot of information about who he believes it to be and not get it shut down. But JR, just expect, if we're doing a third-party guilt defense, there to be a lot of legal battles on that particular area of law in the coming week.
Anything else that we need to touch on before we call it a night?
We've covered a lot of ground, so.
Yeah, we have, yeah. It's going to be an interesting week to see what happens with the defense for sure.
Yeah, we're all interested, and we'll need to buckle up.
All right, Brian, Luke, Sheely, guys, as always, thank you so very much.
Thank you.
Testimony is going to resume tomorrow morning at 9:30, and of course we will be there. You can watch it several different ways. You can watch it on our WLTX Plus channel, our WLTX YouTube page, and on our website, WLTX.com. Of course, we'll be in the courtroom tomorrow with our team of reporters and have full reports right here on News 19. We'll see you then.